I physically couldn't bring myself to just force myself into anything that felt remotely like sex. I just was like, the thought of it was just like, yuck. And I felt really bad. I felt like I'd sort of, like, was I ever going to get that part of me back again? And it was difficult in relationship to open up to my husband about that, because I felt shame around that I didn't want to have sex, it was painful, and I didn't feel sexy in any way, shape, or form. I'd gained quite a lot of weight. I didn't recognize my body anymore, and I just felt not like me. I felt sad anyway and depressed. So there was nothing in me that wanted any kind of sexual, sensual relationship.
So, Ali, welcome to the podcast, All About You. And we're hoping for the next little while that we get to know all about you.
Excellent.
And can we start, and you can tell me a little bit about who you are and how you happen to be in this seat today?
Well, if you're of a certain age and an Australian, so the age is probably around 40 to 60, maybe, and a woman, you would know me back in the day from my modeling days when I was 16, 17, 18, so it's when I started. And I was very fortunate. I was able to sort of forge out a really lovely career here in Australia. And just enjoyed being able to, do a bit of travel with that. And it's how I met my husband, who was also a bit of a celeb at the time. He was hosting a show called Perfect Match, a dating show. And I fell in love with him on the screen, like about 3 other million women did as well. And we met. We were married within, or engaged within 2.5, 3 months, married in about another year after that. And then at the age of 22, we moved to LA. My husband wanted to try the Hollywood scene. We were meant to be there for 3 years. We were there for 25 years. And while I was over there, I tried modeling for a little bit in LA, but it was no fun. I was really ready. I was ready to be done with it. It's not something that I ever thought I'd continue on later on in my life anyway, but dropped modeling, and started work. Oh, and then we had our first child at, I was about 26. About 26. And during that time when I was pregnant, a lady who I knew, who was running a birthing sort of a clinic, I was talking to her about how much negativity there was around the birthing process and raising children, and the horror stories I'd been told. And I was so excited to be pregnant. I'd been wanting to be pregnant since the age of 5. I'd wanted to be a mum for so long. And she said, would you like to come and work with me? So I said, yes. So I had our first little one. And then after that, I sort of trained under her to become a birth assistant.
And did you have good pregnancies? Were you someone were you a glowy, looked great and thrived being pregnant?
Well, look, I think I was. And then sort of, Cam will be like, yeah, but do you remember when you popped your rib? And do you remember when this happened and that happened? And I was like, all of that goes out the window. I was like, no, I loved every second of it. Look, I think in comparison to a lot of women, I think absolutely, I think I did. I think it was great. I was like, by the second trimester, no nausea. I didn't have any of that. I know some women have that awful thing where they're throwing up, 3 times a day. So, I think I did. I think it was really good. And it had a few interesting births in there, 3 births. The last one was an absolute doozy. That was completely unexpected and awful. But yeah, they were all pretty good. So yeah, I did that for a while, and then
So was that like, were you like a doula or what?
yes, I didn't have like a doula license or anything like that, but that was basically what I was doing. I was there for, because I didn't have a medical background. I was there for the emotional physical support before, during, and after the pregnancy, and that was for the whole family as well. So, and I loved that because I just loved anything to do with babies and pregnancy and birth. I just thought I still think it's miraculous. So I always say I'm still tempted to go back into that line of work and get my actual doula license here, and go back into it because I just love it so much. So I did that, and then I finally, I was a stay-at-home mum with the three kids, and then my lifelong dream was to become a preschool teacher. And I finally did that when I was about 42. I finally got my degree and went and started teaching at a little school in Malibu, which was I don't know if you know it, but there's like an education called Rudolf Steiner. And yeah, so it's Rudolf Steiner. So all my kids went through Rudolf Steiner. So I just loved, particularly the early years. So it was a Rudolf Steiner style school. So, and that sort of just took me up to, I was teaching right up until we sort of left for when we came back in 2017. And since then, I've just been assisting at Steiner schools now, and working sort of with kids with learning disabilities or kids on the spectrum. And yeah, I've written a book and I've got a podcast with my husband. Yeah, so
You're pretty busy, but kids and babies are a big passion.
huge passion, absolutely huge passion. And now I've got two of my three children are out and gone and flown the nest, and my youngest is just about to be 18. So yeah, that's left a massive hole for me. So being able to go to school and be around the little ones again, does my heart good. I like that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a mum of four, and two of mine are in their 20s, and then I've got two younger. And honestly, every time one goes, it actually kills me. For
Yes.
months, I literally have a pain in my heart. It's
Yeah,
terrible, even though
I
I'm
know.
delighted for them. But oh,
Yes. Yeah, it is truly the feeling of nothing feels more bittersweet, because they're going to go. The fact that they go is really good, that you've done good parenting in a way, and they're sort of on their own, and they can do it. But oh my gosh, because I've always said, jokingly, but kind of not jokingly, to the kids, I'm like, you can live with me forever, live with us forever, and when you get married, you just bring your husbands in, and we'll all have just lived together. And they look at me like, Jesus Christ, Mom, are you kidding me?
we may
Which I
be the
kind of
same.
was and kind of not.
So my kids are like, we know that you've got visions of these holidays and there's all these husbands and wives and grandchildren. One of my daughter's teasing, she goes, it's not going to happen, Mum. And I'm like, don't say that. Let
Yes.
me believe that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And people are like, where are you going to, are you going to live? You're going to move around when you get older. And I'm like, I'm going to live wherever my children and grandchildren are. I'm like, and I hope they're all in a similar spot, because, God forbid they're, spread out across the world. I don't know what I'm going to do then, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how has re-entry from living in California to Australia?
It was enormously challenging for many, many reasons. Our whole life was there. Our 25 years, obviously, all the kids were there, raised there, all of their friends were there, all of their friends' families who we were deeply connected to were there, all of my girlfriends were there. My work was there. So it was so challenging to say goodbye to all of that. And 25 years is a long time to be away. So I had kept in contact with a couple of friends, but not really that many. So it's been, years now of reconnecting and sort of finding new people to be friends with. And at a certain age, that's really, really, really hard to do. And I didn't have that in that you have when you've got little kids, where you meet the mums and you like raise the kids together. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. So it's been very, very difficult, very lonely, lonely, lonely at time. And then coupled with, that's when, before, I didn't realize, but before I even left, I was starting to get perimenopausal symptoms without knowing it. But the stress of the move and the exhaustion just absolutely skyrocketed everything. So I just was in full blown perimenopause by the time a few months into moving here.
And Ali, do you mind me asking roughly what age you would say you first noticed those symptoms?
Yeah, I'm going to say sort of 46 was when 40, I mean, sort of looking back, there was changes in my cycle a little bit and my sleep sort of at sort of 45, I would say. But yeah, by the time I was 46 when we moved here, and that's when that's when my cycle really went crazy. And within a few months or maybe a year, I've started getting the first hot flushes and those sorts of symptoms.
And whenever you say your cycle went crazy, was it like they were just all over the place, or you're bleeding really heavily, or it was just chaotic? What was it?
Yeah, it was sort of both, actually. It was sometimes I'd get a period once every 2 weeks, sometimes not for 2 months. And then I'd get a period that was so crazy heavy that I could not have enough pads and tampons to sort of catch the flow. Yeah, and like a few big blood clots, and I was like, holy cow. So yeah, all of that.
And then what other symptoms did you start to notice? I mean, obviously, perimenopause is having a bit of a moment. Everyone's talking about it. You kind of look on social media, there's all these lists: 11 symptoms of the perimenopause, 43 symptoms of the perimenopause, 101 symptoms. What were the ones that really were beginning to become troublesome for you?
Yeah, it was I mean, the hot flashes, the hot sweats were really, I mean, they were like nothing I'd ever experienced. And of course they were in the day, and they seemed to get worse at night. Um, and I was sleepless for for the hot flushes, but also for the anxiety. I was that just spiked enormously. I could not shut my brain off at night. And with that came depression as well.
Was that
I
something that you'd had before, or was that
No,
completely
I'd
new to
never had
you?
that before. Yeah, yeah. And I didn't feel like I'd had anxiety before. I mean, everyone gets a little anxious here and there, but nothing like that. And anxiety about things that really didn't make sense. Like having, I write this in the book, where I would wake up just like thinking panicked about seeing my children being eaten by a crocodile. Like it was just ridiculous, like they live in Sydney. There isn't any crocodiles, but I would just have like, I couldn't get my brain to stop thinking about these visions and visions. I was like, what is going on? And it had come back the next night, and just ridiculous stuff that had no relevance to what was really happening for me. Yeah, libido was absolutely nowhere to be seen. I just had no energy whatsoever. So the idea of, you'd read these things saying, oh, the way that's going to help you is to get sleep and do exercise. I was like, how do you do that? Like, I can't get either of those going because I'm too tired. I had dry eyes. I had dry mouth. What else do I have? Itchy ears, which I never knew was a perimenopause symptom, but I was like, I had that. Okay.
Everything
Um,
starts to itch, I think.
yes, yeah.
See a lot of
And
women with itchy scalp.
yes,
you
Yep.
know, and they're buying every shampoo. They're convinced that they're allergic to their shampoo or allergic to
Right.
their hair dye, but actually it's probably nothing to do with that. But yeah,
Yeah.
the dry eyes is also a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. And yeah, like the effects of it, and probably things that I'm sure I just brushed off as other, stressful stuff or whatever. I'm sure there was other things as well. Headaches. I'd get some headaches. I'm not normally a headachy person. So yeah, I think, oh, and heart palpitations.
Right, okay.
Lots of heart stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And did you end up going to see a doctor worried that there was actually something wrong with your heart, or were you just
Yep.
sort of staying at home managing this yourself?
Yep. No, absolutely went to the emergency room one time. I've actually been there twice for my heart, thinking that I was absolutely having some kind of heart issue because I could not get my heart to actually get back into its rhythm. Um, and of course, they do all the hookups and the blood tests and echocardiograms, and they're like, nope, nothing, nothing, nothing. Do all the tests, the stress test, nope, nothing. I was like, okay, which is good but frustrating at the same time.
Totally. Of course, isn't it amazing that estrogen and various other hormones can all do these things all over our bodies, from give you dry eyes to make your heart beat completely irregular and fast. Like, it's just unbelievable. You
It
know,
really is. Yeah.
are everywhere. And I think, you know, just for any of our listeners, we actually have estrogen receptors all over our body, in our brain, in our heart, in our blood vessels, on our kidneys. So these hormones don't just impact whether you can be reproductive or not. It's so much more than that. And I think for years, the menopause has been thought of is, oh, that time whenever your periods eventually stop. Oh, isn't that marvelous? And you might get a little bit hot.
Yeah.
But actually, it's so much more than that. And it's more than being a little bit hot. Those hot flushes can be really very debilitating and literally can sort of take your breath away and mean that you can't
Mm.
really focus or finish your conversation. Um, is that kind of what you experienced?
Yeah, because you sort of, yeah, exactly right. Because you sort of go, oh, well, you get hot for a hot second and then it goes away. But it's, like anyone who's had one, I remember, just sitting there at dinner time and I'd have to get up and go outside and just take as much of my clothing off as possible and just wait for the feeling to pass, because it was also it felt like it kicked my adrenaline in at the same time, and that was what would happen at night, where not only would I get hot but the adrenaline would go, so wide awake, and then you've got to get your body to cool down and your mind to calm down to try to get back to sleep until the next one rolls around. So yeah, they're exhausting.
Absolutely. And did you notice any impact initially on your family and friends, or were you trying to kind of hide it and keep it hidden from everyone?
Look, I did my best to sort of cope with it without affecting, my family. But I was clear about what was happening because I was writing the book at the same time that it was all happening, which was actually a gift in itself, because then I started going, oh, this is making more sense to me now that this is all under the perimenopause window. So, um, but I pulled myself out of a fair amount of social events at the time. I remember things like, going for walks with the kids. I would have to go much slower than everyone else, and I would have to stop and catch my breath because I couldn't keep up with anything physically that the family was doing. Um, and I think the kids they weren't worried or anything because they knew it was perimenopause, but it was way harder for my husband and the changes, to the relationship there, because I couldn't sleep next to him, because if the little sleep I was getting, if he was snoring, it was like, oh God, no. And I had to have the sheets off my body all night. I had to have the fan on full blast. So, and he would be there, and layers of clothing, freezing cold. But in the end, we ended up just sleeping in separate beds. And yeah, I didn't want to be around anyone a lot of the time, but I also felt really lonely a lot of the time. So yeah, it was challenging. I think I was probably, I don't know if I was hard to be around, but certainly there was a big difference in the way I was behaving and the way I normally do.
And you obviously sound like you caught on quite quickly as to what was going on. And is that because you had friends or you'd done a lot of reading before, or you were kind of quite educated about the perimenopause? Because there's definitely lots of women out there who probably wouldn't have caught on quite so quickly as to what all these weird symptoms were.
Yeah, I would have been like those women for sure, because as you were saying before, I hadn't even heard of the word perimenopause, and I thought menopause was something that happened in late 60s when your period stops. And that was it. I'm like, that's fine. I look forward to that. But yeah, it was when I just started reading, researching, and that was when all the light bulbs started going off for me as well, and all the just absolutely gobsmacked at how deeply women are affected by perimenopause, and how the scarcity of the conversation around it at that time was just astonishing to me. So this is pre-COVID, and I just didn't understand why no one had told me about it. I'm the youngest of three sisters. I have women friends that are older than me. No one gave me any idea, any warning, any heads up, nothing about what could happen, what might happen. And yeah, it was like this big dark sort of secret that was coming for me that no one had told me about. So I was like, that's when I started reading about it. I'm like, okay, this, I would really like to write about this. So firstly, women have some more knowledge, and if anyone's feeling like I was, which was just hugely alone, that yeah, that women don't feel so alone in it, because I think that's something that's quite common for women to feel, yeah, like not knowing what's happening, feeling like they were crazy and not really knowing what to do, because it's not like you're sick. That's the thing. It's, you go to the doctor and go, I just don't feel like myself, but I'm not throwing up and I haven't broken a bone, so what the hell's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the lovely thing is that a lot of women who are currently perimenopausal or just coming into the postmenopause will have grown up alongside you. So in ways, you were that person who was on the front of their favorite magazine whenever they were 14, 15, 16. And then here you are now, basically coming along that part of life's journey as well, which I think is really lovely. And was writing a book something that you always wanted to do, or is it something that just sort of came to you more recently?
I have always wanted to write, and I've written just articles for sort of online magazines here and there. Um, but if someone had have said, a year before I started writing the book, you're going to write a book on menopause, I'd be like, absolutely not in a million years. I will be writing about a love story that's set in Somerset in the 1800s with fairies. That will be my book. That was like historical fiction. Yeah, but it was wild that I just that was what came to me really strongly, that I was like, I think I'm going to write about this. And it was definitely clear to me once I started how much I wanted to write about it. Like it was, there was a lot I wanted to write, and a lot I wanted to research about. So I'm really grateful I had the opportunity to do that.
As a family doctor, one of the reasons I chose that specialty is I love to be part of people's stories. Have women been reaching out to you since they've read your book and sharing some stories with you about their experiences?
Not only have I had like incredible messages like via Instagram, but just even because I've done sort of menopause talks, or I've done talks, gone to sell the book and spoken about menopause as well. And going out to particularly the smaller country areas, like, I've been to Wagga and Griffith and Mudgee and those places where there's not, the women aren't really getting the help that they really need. It always, it's so beautiful. Like I'll start talking, I'll talk about the book, and we'll open up at the end to questions. And more often than not, we end up just talking about our collective experience as women with menopause. And someone will say, "Can I just tell you what happened to me?" And then someone else in the audience will go, "I had that too, and you could try this." So we end up like having like a big, huge women's circle all talking about menopause. And it's so healing for, I think, everyone in the room. And it's a healing experience for me, in the sense that going through it the way I did and feeling so alone and thinking I was crazy half the time. And then you come to find out that 85% of the women I spoke to are having the exact same experience as me, and it's like, oh my God, you went through it exactly like me. So yeah, you start to feel normalized and like, oh, we're a bit of a club in this way then. So it's been a really beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah, amazing. Isn't it so nice to have that kind of collaborative and, have people shouting across the room, try this, I did this. And
Yes.
you go, oh, never thought of that. That sounds awesome. You touched a little bit about your the impact on your relationship and sleep, and lots of women really struggle with that. One of the things that I see a lot as a GP, often whenever people actually come in to have their cervical screening, or what we used to call the pap smear, I'll often ask, is sex uncomfortable, and it often all comes out at that appointment. But, definitely sex, libido, all becomes a bit of a nightmare during this time for lots of women. There's no doubt some people sail through it, but you've been pretty honest about the troubles that you had at that time, and how it made you feel. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it made me, I just felt like so broken in that department, and just felt like I couldn't, I physically couldn't bring myself to just force myself into anything that felt remotely like sex. Um, I just was like, the thought of it was just like, yuck. And I felt really bad. I felt like I'd sort of, like, was I ever going to get that part of me back again? And it was difficult in relationship to open up to my husband about that, because I felt shame around that I didn't want to have sex, it was painful, and I didn't feel sexy in any way, shape, or form. I'd gained quite a lot of weight. I didn't recognize my body anymore, and I just felt not like me. I felt sad anyway and depressed. So there was nothing in me that wanted any kind of sexual, sensual relationship. And I was really concerned about that was going to be something that I would always feel like, and that it was going to be something that my husband would be like, well, that's, what do we do? Like, like, this is something that I want and you don't, and how do we make the changes, or where do we go from here with it? So I was worried he was going to walk away from the marriage, and it was a very, very challenging time.
Yeah, I think the reality is that lots of marriages do end over this period of
Yeah.
time. And I think, I definitely see a lot of women who are really quite anxious, and they're really worried that their partner is going to leave, and that, they feel their partner's getting really frustrated at them. And even, other women will describe that their partner is very, very patient, but, he's had enough kind of thing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's definitely a very challenging time. Is that something that you felt you had friends that you were able to chat about it with, or do you think it still remains quite a taboo subject for women to talk about?
Look, I hope that it's not a taboo anymore, because I get why it could be a difficult subject to talk about. I really understand that. Um, the friends that I have it's amazing how common that one is, the loss of libido. Like
It's
it's
I actually get to the point where I say to my patients, honestly, it's the minority of people who are having sex at this time. I know that sounds maybe a shock to people, but it really is. So you're
yeah,
actually in a majority of people. So can we just put it out there that you are not weird and that this
yes,
is not going to last forever? But I think for a lot of women, they're also, women are sexual beings. They want to have pleasure, and for them, it's a loss for themselves, never mind just for
yeah,
their partner as well. But
yeah,
I think it's definitely much more common than people appreciate,
yeah,
and it's not just the vaginal dryness that makes sex very uncomfortable. It's actually that sort of general can't really be bothered, not really that much interest. Actually, if you can be bothered, it's probably really difficult to actually have an orgasm in comparison to how it was before. And therefore, it all just feels like a bit too hard, really. And
yeah,
also, you probably feel a bit of fury towards your partner as well. So,
yeah,
so you'd rather punch them than cuddle them.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I think, it's so fantastic that you were really open enough to include chapters in your book where you were really open, because I think it's lovely for other women to go, okay, I'm not this one solo woman sitting in Australia and everyone else
yeah.
around me is having these really great intimate relationships, and, I'm an absolute big fat failure.
Yeah. And it's sort of one of those things that you just hear over and over again. Well, if you're not having sex, what, the marriage is going to fail. This is important part you've got to be having, and it's, you get that pounded into your head over and over again, and you just, like, I was like, oh my God, we're not, what's going to happen? Another month goes by and another month goes by, and it's like, oh boy, this is not good. This is not good. And then you hear the less you do, the less you want to do it, and you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Like, there's so much there that can feel really frightening. And it wasn't until Cam actually started being able to really talk to him about what was happening physically to my body, that he started understanding, what was actually going on. That it wasn't like I was choosing to not have sex with him. There was actual physical discomfort, like physical pain, that I could not do what he would love to be doing. And and I just said, if we can be on the same team, that would be really helpful. So we can look at, we're on Team Daddo and menopause is here. So we can figure out, the two of us, how we're going to deal with menopause, rather than I'm having to deal with menopause and we're on opposing sides. Like, it just didn't help anything for everything else that you're already coping with. Then to cope with an angry husband, it's too much. It's too much. And I really understand why marriages do break down, because I think without that communication going, it's so hard sometimes to work out what's going on for the guy, or if you're with another woman. But for the partner of that woman, it's there are some big changes that you can see in your partner happening, and it's like, and if you don't know what's happening, I think that's the hardest thing. Cam was just like, as long as I know what's happening, I feel like I can deal with it better. But if that communication isn't there, it's going to be really tough.
Top. Yeah, absolutely. We always talk a lot about knowledge is power, but we actually have to give the knowledge to our partners,
Yeah.
and I think our children as well.
Yes.
You have daughters,
Yes.
and I think it's also really good not to scare anyone or anything like that, but I think it's
Yeah.
great to have that open conversation. And one of the questions I often ask a patient is, do you know how old your mum was when she had her menopause? And it clearly was something that was absolutely not talked about
Yeah.
sort of 30, 40 years ago at all. And I think it is great that hopefully, people who are teenagers and in their 20s now are definitely going to be in a much better position And did you
Yes.
feel like you chatted with your kids about what was going on for you once you had worked it out?
Yeah, they know a lot about menopause. They sure know, and unfortunately, they're not looking that forward to it. But that's okay. Even my son knows about menopause now too. So, yeah, and I think other people have said this as well, but I really feel strongly that when at school, when you're learning about sex education, you're learning about periods, that it doesn't have to be a whole hours spent on it. But I do feel like girls should understand that there is the end of the cycle as well. You're talking about the start of the cycle, what might happen, but also talk about the end of it as well, just so they have a clear picture that it is a cycle, the whole thing. So they know that word, and they know, just to say, you could go home and talk to your mum about her menopause and see what she went through, just to have, so it's a normal conversation again. But I certainly never heard anything about it when I was starting my period, but I just think that would be a simple way just to sort of get get that even further away from not talking about it and the taboo of talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned how you had gained some weight and you didn't recognize your body. And that's definitely another thing I see a lot in my clinic. Women will come in and they'll say, I've always, done this amount of activity and I've always been able to keep my weight under control doing that. And I've always eaten this way and suddenly it doesn't seem to work anymore. Or even if they haven't actually gained weight, they'll be saying that their clothes don't fit anymore because they just have this sort of tummy and belly fat that's just being distributed a different way. Obviously, you've come from that background of modeling and, lots of sort of pressure on appearance. And do you think that that made it even trickier?
Look, I actually think it's tricky for everyone, whether or not, you know, you've been a model or not. I think that is, as you were saying, how you were and what was working and what you knew worked no longer works, and you've done absolutely nothing different, but you've gone up 2 sizes. Like, it's such a weird experience and a frustrating experience as well. But I because I'd been out of the modeling industry for so long in America, I think I sort of had left that sort of view of myself behind. But certainly coming back to Australia, where I was still remembered as a model, I do remember and did feel that I felt embarrassed about the size I was, and the cellulite, as they say, from neck to knee, that I still have. But yeah, I was like, oh God, people are going to look at me and just go, what happened to her? I remember her as this slim, toned model, and now look at me. So I did have moments of that where I felt really a bit under the microscope and a bit embarrassed about how I had physically changed. But it was actually really all in my own head. It really was, because women have just been nothing but lovely and supportive, and just said, oh, I think you're more beautiful now, and all of those lovely things, which, whether or not that's true, but that no one has ever, I have felt, at least to my face, been judgmental about how I look now in comparison to my 17, 18-year-old self.
Okay, that's so good. And your book, has Cam read your book? What did he think of it?
He has read it, and it was really delightful. When it came out, May last year, and he had a trip away about 2 weeks after it came out, and he took my book with him, and then he took a selfie of himself holding the book in bed, and he wrote underneath, he said, I've just finished your book. did you actually write this book for me? I understand you so much better. I know, it was so lovely. So, yeah, he's been nothing but super duper supportive. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So, how are you now? Do you feel like you're through the worst of it? Do you feel like most of your symptoms are behind you?
Well, here's the thing I'm actually going to do now, which I'm actually excited about. Um, so I am postmenopausal, but I am still not sleeping well. I am still getting hot flushes at night. I still feel like I'm getting the occasional mood swing. And my GP has said, do you want to just try HRT? Just see how that goes. And I'm like, I would love to try it actually. I went through all of the symptoms and was managing it all naturopathically and with all sorts of, I did the exercise and meditation and yoga. I did all of that, which was great. But the fact that I'm still dealing with the symptoms now, she's like, and the more I've spoken to women and the more I've spoken to doctors and understood how incredibly beneficial and HRT can be for a lot of women. And I know it's not for everyone, but my history is clear of, I think that I could be a good candidate just to see how that goes. If it can make me sleep, it's worth its weight in gold. I would, if that's the only thing it does, I'll be thrilled.
Not sleeping is just one of the worst symptoms, isn't it? Feel
The
so
worst.
alone in the night. Everyone else seems to be able to sleep fine, and you're like lying there, literally, and your brain will not stop. It's not even
Yeah.
you're just like lying there. And my mum used to say to me, just lie there. Don't worry. Like, just lie there. It doesn't matter and rest. I'll be thinking, but I'm not just lying there. I'm like
No.
lying there freaking out about 50 different things all the time.
Yes,
If I was just
exactly.
lying there, it'd be okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
know the
yeah,
night
night
seems to
seems
go
to
on
go on
forever.
forever.
I'm like,
Yeah,
when
when
is the
is the
sun
sun
coming up
coming up?
so I can actually get out of bed?
That's right. It's a bit like whenever you've got a crying baby at the other end of the spectrum.
So true.
It feels so much worse when you have a child with a fever. So, apart from obviously, you're going to go on a bit of a journey with some hormone replacement therapy, which I think is amazing. And best of luck with that. Hopefully, you're going to get an amazing result. What's
Yeah.
next for you guys?
Oh, do you know, I'm not really sure. We're loving doing the podcast on relationships. We'll keep on going with that. I've actually got something that have been working on for some time, which is actually a menopause app. And it's an app where we are hoping to really help and reach out to as many women as possible with I'm doing it with a lady who's a qualified fitness instructor specifically for perimenopausal women. And so she's got the fitness routine, she's got nourishment, she's got breathing techniques. We want to do a telehealth so those country women I was talking about have got access to doctors and HRT. We want to have a store that we do have a store that we can have as many products, to help as many women as possible. So that's something that we're working on, and that will be coming out next year. So we're very excited about that. So
Watch this space.
watch this space. Yeah.
So, just circling back to your book, what are the key takeaways that you'd love people to take away from this amazing book that you really did bare your soul?
I think, look, if you haven't hit perimenopause, the first one would be get yourself ready, like understand what you might go through, understand what it is, so it's not a big sort of boogeyman waiting to come and eat you up. Um, and and also start looking at some changes that you might want to make now health wise. If you smoke, or if you don't exercise, or if you drink a bit too much or whatever, just sort of looking at those things that may affect more of your hormones, sort of thing, so you can go into perimenopause feeling your best self. Once you're in it, find a doctor like yourself. If your doctor doesn't know enough about hormones, find someone else. Keep searching till you find a doctor that believes you and understands about the depth of what estrogen can do when you're losing it and lacking in it. And just, ask women around you, who do you see? Where do you go? Find the information so you do get taken care of. It's not something that you need to push through. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things as women, we push through so much physically and emotionally. And I just think it's too much to keep doing that. Where we've done so much in our lives already. Don't keep pushing through. And then also know that there is absolutely light at the end of the tunnel, that you won't always feel the way you're feeling. So many women talk about this zest for life that they have post-menopausal, that they're having sex again, that they're more creative than ever, that they have a better life than ever. And I think that messaging is something that we need to hear more of, because it can feel so devastating that this is what you think your life's going to end up like, and it's not the case. There's much more to life than just menopause. There's a lot of life to live post-menopausal.
Absolutely. Look at all those trailblazers in their 50s and 60s, starting new
Yeah,
companies, starting new businesses, going off, traveling around the world like, the world's our oyster. And
absolutely.
I always ask my guests this final question, which is, if you had your 20-something self, what piece of advice would you give her?
Um, Gosh, I think, I'm trying to sort of move it out of, I'm like, get ready for menopause. But that would be one piece of advice. Um, I think it would be just find a way to find a bit more peace in your life. I think I struggled a lot with looking outside of myself a lot, and not doing anywhere near the amount of self-care that I needed. I think that was something I was not even remotely on my list of needs and cares. Everything was all about what other people needed and wanted from me. So if I could put myself at the top of that list, at the age of, in my 20s, I think I would have been a lot happier a lot earlier.
I hear you. I hear you. Sometimes I think we're so busy trying to be the super mum and the super wife and the super whatever we are at our career that actually we seem to, 20 years goes past and you realize you've done literally nothing for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And then you've got to learn how to do that and find out, who am I? What do I want? Like, wow, that's a question that seems really odd to me. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, and I'm really
Um,
excited to see what happens next. And when
Thank
you
you.
launch your next venture, then hopefully you'll come back and talk to me again.
Yes, would love to. Thanks so much, Shauna.
No problem. Awesome. Thank you. Bye.